With Derek Carr being released by the Las Vegas Raiders earlier this week, what are some potential landing spots you potentially see him going to?
So, I mean, we have talked about Derek Carr a numerous amount of times, both this season and last. I want to preview the entire conversation by saying the Vegas Raiders are probably the dumbest organization in the NFL, just based off of they just gave him an extension last year and they let him go. So for you to sit here and blame the quarterback when you have one of the worst defenses in the league, inconsistencies at the coaching position, at the coordinator position, it's just kind of been up and down since he's been drafted. And then you obviously have the personnel issues with the Antonio Brown situation, trading away your future to obtain Devontae Adams, drafting players that aren't even on your team at the moment. For the last couple of seasons, I believe they have the least remaining draft picks on their active roster in the NFL. So that's just absolutely ridiculous. But again, to talk about his actual potential landing spots, I would probably go with three teams here. And I'm going to go from third to first. Third, what I believe the New Orleans Saints. I think that he can fix some of those problems in terms of inconsistencies. Obviously, since Drew Brees has retired, they have had three, four quarterbacks. I mean, they've tried with Simeon, they tried with Dalton, they tried with Winston. They even put in of course now I'm going
Taysom
to
Hill.
forget this Taysom Hill. There you go, the utility guy that just cannot play quarterback at a consistent clip. And it has not worked. Obviously, New Orleans is very, very, very well over the cap, and it would be very interesting to see what they would do in terms of either restructuring contracts, letting people go, trading off assets to make the deal work. I mean, he has met with the Saints, I believe, two or three times already, and one of those meetings went up until 10:30, if not 11 p.m., and then he went back the very next day. So I don't know exactly what they talked about. Obviously, I'm not an inside beat reporter, but I would say that that is a potential spot just for the frequency of what he has done already thus far with them. And New Orleans, frankly, just needing a quarterback at this point. I mean, they have decent running backs when they have Alvin Kamara back there. If Michael Thomas can get healthy, they obviously have Olave, Juwan Johnson at the tight end position. Their defense isn't horrible, so you can really just kind of insert him and make them a playoff contender. Now that Tom Brady has retired out of the NFC South, I would feel that Derek Carr would easily make them divisional favorites. Then I'm going to move into my second team. I personally think this team is a little bit more interesting, right? So this is one of the teams that I have kind of teetered back and forth with just because of their inconsistencies and ineptitudes over the last couple of years, and that's going to be the Commanders. They have tried so many different quarterbacks. They haven't committed to Sam Howell, but they said going into next season he would be number one on the depth chart. I think that would change if they brought in Derek Carr. Similar to the Colts, they've had some plug-in quarterbacks over the last couple of years. They did the Alex Smith thing. They did Taylor Heineke. They tried Carson Wentz trading for him from the Colts. And a lot of these options didn't necessarily work. I mean, Taylor Heineke probably had the most successful out of the three, at least in my opinion, in terms of when being available and when competing. But it just didn't work out for a lot of them. I think that going after Derek Carr, a veteran quarterback that is still technically in the prime of his career, with the wide receiver core and the defensive presence that Washington has, Ron Rivera is a solid head coach. Obviously, more defensive minded, but he was on the hot seat earlier in the year before Washington went on that run that they did in the middle of the season. I think that if they interview Eric Bieniemy, who's going in, if not tomorrow, the next day for an offensive coordinator position interview, which before we even move forward, that makes no sense. You would leave the Kansas City Chiefs to go to a crappy team like the Commanders. I don't know. That just doesn't make sense. But in terms of just the situation hypothetical, if they were to get Eric Bieniemy, I think that that would be another incentive for Carr to look at Washington because he is a brilliant mind. He's been working with Patrick Mahomes and that offense. I think that he would be a brilliant offensive coordinator to work with Derek Carr and his talent. So once again, that's just number two for that reason, just because of the pieces available. And then number one, everybody's talking about it, the New York Jets. I mean, they're literally a quarterback away from going to an AFC championship, if not better. One of the best defenses in the league. Obviously, Sauce Gardner wins Defensive Rookie of the Year. Garrett Wilson wins Offensive Rookie of the Year. You have the potential when oh my God, of course, now I'm going to forget. Brees Hall comes back from an ACL injury. You have a great head coach in Robert Saleh. Obviously, the AFC East outside of Buffalo is pretty even in terms of what New England and what Miami have been able to do over the last couple of seasons. So I would say that you insert Derek Carr. Again, that makes you an automatic AFC championship, if not Super Bowl contender, in my opinion, because of what they already have. And I just think that the Jets have been desperate for a quarterback. If they pull the trigger and they go after him, I think that he would mesh very well with that team. They're also very, very young, so it's not something that he would have to worry about in that regard. And I think they have a pretty decent amount of cap space as well. So I think Derek Carr fits perfectly for the New York Jets as the number one option for me.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be some teams that are going to be looking towards potentially adding Derek Carr to the fold. And Kevin, I do agree with the list that you've provided so far. If anything, I'll probably just add a couple more teams, simply just because when you look at Derek Carr, is he somebody that's a top tier quarterback? No. Typically he throws around 20 to 25 touchdowns a year. The only bad side that comes with Derek Carr is that he does have a tendency to turn the ball over quite frequently. The last 2 years, he has turned the ball over 28 times via interception, 14 in the last 2 seasons, both in 2022 and now 2021. So, you're not getting somebody who's a grade A quarterback, but compared to what some other teams have right now at their quarterback spot, he would definitely be an upgrade. I would just go with 2 teams, so then that way we kind of get like a full 5 list team with Derek Carr potentially going to these 5 teams. So one of the teams that I have in mind is definitely the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons, when you look at their current quarterback depth right now, it's Desmond Ridder and Marcus Mariota. And it was pretty obvious to me that the Falcons completely abandoned on the idea of Marcus Mariota being the starting quarterback for the Falcons, because the Falcons actually had a decent chance to be able to make some moves to potentially get into the playoffs last year, and they fell incredibly short. And they actually decided to go with Desmond Ridder for the last couple games of the season and not Marcus. And some of the reports I've seen surrounding Marcus is that, Marcus might not only be out of a job when it comes to the Falcons in the foreseeable future, his NFL career could potentially be on the line based on how things did not work out very well with his tenure last year with the Falcons. So that'll be something to monitor. But to kick it back to Carr, I think that Carr would definitely improve their chances in what I would consider as a wide open NFC South. Like Kevin said, Tom Brady retired. The Bucks had been NFC South champs the last couple years. I'm saying if you add in Derek Carr and you look at the rest of the cast of the NFC South, that could be enough to swing the Falcons into a potential first place finish in the NFC South next year. And when you look at the other teams in the NFC South at their cap space situation, the Falcons have the best situation via cap compared to the Saints, the Bucks, and the Panthers. If memory serves me correct, they are the number 2 team with the most amount of available cap space going into this offseason. And my mind is that more than likely they're potentially looking to bring in Lamar Jackson if he becomes available. More than likely, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think the Ravens are probably going to franchise tag him. So, maybe they look at a situation to bring in Derek Carr for how long of a contract, I don't know. Maybe they do a 1-year deal just to keep it safe and then to kind of keep their options open with Lamar next year if Lamar were to be available. They have over $50 million in cap space to work with, so maybe they sign him to a 1-year deal and kind of do a plug-in quarterback situation for next year. And honestly, for my second team, I'm going to keep it within the NFC South. I'm going to go look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Brady retired. When you look at their current quarterback situation, they have Blaine Gabbert and Kyle Trask. That to me is not really a winning formula at the quarterback position. That is quite a drop off. And more than likely, if the Bucs were to start either one of those quarterbacks, I think it's going to be a very bumpy ride for the Buccaneers. It was already a bumpy ride this past season with Brady leading the quarterback position, and they finished at an 8-9 record. That's kind of uncommon to see from a Tom Brady-led team, especially at the quarterback spot. And I think if they were to potentially bring in Derek Carr, it would bring some stability. Granted, he is a pocket passer, and stylistically, it would be similar to what Tampa has run the last couple years. And they do have a decent wide receiving core. You have Mike Evans. You have Chris Godwin. You have Cameron Brate. I mean, you have some decent targets to be able to throw to. You have a somewhat decent backfield. The only problem is that their offensive line is in shambles and their entire offensive coaching staff just got gutted after the season. So, there's definitely some things that are kind of working against Tampa right now, but maybe if they bring in Derek Carr, it could stabilize some things and maybe the Bucks could gain some confidence going into the preseason or training camp if they were to bring in a pretty decent quarterback in Derek Carr. So overall, I think Derek Carr, decent quarterback, not a grade A quarterback, but I think when it comes to the Falcons and the Buccaneers, those would be two teams that I would potentially look at to potentially make a move to potentially bring him into the fold. But I'll just kind of leave it at that.